Hello students, I welcome you all to my channel. Today we are going to start with Introductory Macroeconomics. As we all know that economics in our 12th standard consists of two parts. Part A is Introductory Macroeconomics and Part B is Indian Economic Development. Both Part A and Part B carry 40 marks each. That makes your theory paper of 80 marks. And there is another part which is the project work which will carry 20 marks. So now let us know what is macroeconomics. But before knowing what macroeconomics is, let us recap what we did in our 11th standard. We have already started studying economics in the form of introductory microeconomics. Microeconomics is also a branch of economics, as we have already studied, but it is that branch of economics which studies individual production unit, individual firms, and their decision making. We have known that economics is a science of scarcity. Resources are scarce and it has alternative uses. That is what we learned, and because of which optimum allocation of resources is what is required. That is what we studied in microeconomics. Macroeconomics is little different from microeconomics, though both macroeconomics and microeconomics are related in the sense macroeconomics derives much of its theories from microeconomics. There is a basic difference between the two. Macroeconomics studies in the larger concept of the economy as a whole. Now, macro, the term macro in English has its origin in the Greek term macros, which means large. We have known that in the last year. Micro also derived from the Greek term, it means small. So what does that mean? It means that in macroeconomics we are going to study the economy as a whole. Here is the definition of macroeconomics. Macroeconomics is defined as that branch of economics which studies economic issues or economic problems at the level of an economy as a whole. That means we are going to study the aggregates. Now, what do we mean by that? By that, we mean that macroeconomics studies such economic questions that concern the welfare of all residents of a country. These questions are like employment for the residents, growth of output in the economy, the problem of price rise, also called inflation, or the problem of depression. Now, what is depression in economics? It means lack of demand for goods and services across different sectors of the economy. Now, we'll learn much deeper about it in subsequent lectures. Macroeconomics also studies how government can improve the state of economy of a country. Now let us know how is macroeconomics different from microeconomics. But before knowing how both these branches of economics are different from each other, it is important for us to know two personalities who are very important in the studies of economics. Adam Smith, regarded as the founding father of the modern economics, was a Scotsman and a professor at the University of Glasgow. In 1776, his work, an inquiry into the nature and cause of the wealth of nations is regarded as the first major comprehensive book on the subject. Now please make a note here. Economics at that time had not evolved as the economics that we study today. It was at that time known as political economy. Now, according to Adam Smith, every individual worked for his self-interest. He said that it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we accept our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. Now, this is very significant. He said that people work for their self-interest, and it is this self-interest which rules the law of demand and supply in the market. The dominant thinking in economics was that all the laborers who are ready to work will find employment, and all the factories will be working at their full capacity. This school of thought is known as the classical tradition. But this school of thought was about to change. The picture that you are seeing here is that of the Great Depression of 1929 and subsequent years. During the Great Depression, the output and employment levels in the countries of Europe and North America fell by huge amounts. Demand for goods in the market was very low. Many factories was lying idle. Workers were thrown out of job. In USA, from the year 1929 to 1933, unemployment level rose from 3% to 25%, and aggregate output in the United States of America fell by about 33%. Now, this caused a revolution in the world of economics. Macroeconomics as a subject, as a separate branch of economics, emerged after the British economist John Maynard Keynes published his celebrated book, The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money in 1936. Now, the events of the Great Depression made economists think about the functioning of the economy in a new manner. The fact that the economy may have long-lasting unemployment had to be now theorized about and explained. John Maynard Keynes' book was an attempt in this direction. Unlike his predecessors, his approach was to examine the working of the economy as a whole in its entirety and examine the interdependence of the different sectors. Thus was the subject of macroeconomics born. Now, actually, in here, the predecessors of John Maynard Keynes, they thought and suggested that if the buyers and sellers in each market take their decision following their own self-interest, economists will not need to think of the wealth and welfare of the economy as a whole separately. So this was what was prevalent during the classical tradition, and in contradiction to it, John Maynard Keynes had a completely different approach towards the study of economics. Now, as we have already known about the concepts of microeconomics and macroeconomics separately, let us now try to draw a distinction between these two branches of economics. We can do so by studying them under certain heads. The first one being basis of the study. Now, microeconomics studies problems of scarcity and choice at the level of an individual, a household, a firm, or an industry, whereas macroeconomics studies problems of scarcity and choice at the level of an economy as a whole. Now, in order to illustrate that, let us suppose microeconomics studies how a consumer exercises his choice of goods and services so that he maximizes his satisfaction with a given income, whereas macroeconomics studies how the national resources are used or the production of defense goods or consumer goods so that the welfare of all the residents is maximized. So basically, in one, that is microeconomics, we are more concerned about the satisfaction, the maximization of the satisfaction of a consumer with his given income, and another one, that is macroeconomics, focuses more on the welfare of the residents or the people. Now, another basis on which these two branches can be differentiated is economic variables. Microeconomics uses economic variables such as consumers' demand or producers' supply. So these are the individual demand and supply, whereas in macroeconomics, on the other hand, uses macroeconomic variables such as aggregate demand and aggregate supply. So what are these aggregate demand and supply? Aggregate demand refers to the demand for all the goods and services in the economy, and aggregate supply refer to the supply of the goods and services in the economy. This is inclusive of all the sectors that is present in the economy.